delighted to welcome you all to this very important and auspicious occasion. My name, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sumati Ramaswamy, and I am the president of the American Institute of Indian Studies, and I have the honor, of course, we are gathered here to felicitate one of our very, very important former colleagues, our former Director General, Dr Pradeep R Mehendiratta. And in order to do so, I'm so delighted to welcome to our midst Mr. Prasad, Mr. Jayant Prasad, and I'm going to read a very brief introduction, after which we'll have a brief ceremony here, and then we'll all go upstairs to read, where many of us have comments to make, so we'll be doing that upstairs. So Mr. Jayant Prasad is a long-time friend and well-wisher of the Institute. He's helped the Institute in many ways in his capacity as Joint Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs. He was instrumental in designating the Institute as an institution that could recommend visas, student visas, directly to the missions in the US, and also the notification of to the Indian Embassy and consulates in the US to honor the AIS visa recommendation letters. Mr. Prasad is a former member of the elite Indian Foreign Service. He served as the Director General of the Delhi-based Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. He has also served as India's ambassador and permanent representative to the Conference on Disarmament, Geneva. He's been a member of the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board on Disarmament Matters between 2005 and 2007, and a rapporteur for the UN Commission on Human Rights in Geneva in 1986. He has also been, to top this all up, did you ever sleep? He's also been India's ambassador to Algeria, Afghanistan and Nepal. He was Joint Secretary of course, at the Ministry of External Affairs, Americas Division. And before doing all of this, and this is very dear to my heart because I'm a historian myself, he taught history in St. Stephen's College, the University of Delhi. And I need to tell this to all my undergraduates, right? You too can become an ambassador if you take history. Welcome, Mr. Prasad. Please come in, and we call upon you and invite you to unveil the bust of Dr. Mehendiratta. Thank you. And I now call upon Dr. S.P. Gore to garland the bust. And may I call upon Dr. Mehendiratta to light the lamp. Do you want to do it with people? Do it with people. You want to offer the show? Let's go. Very nice. May I invite Mr. Georgia, a friend, to please come and light the lamp? May I invite Mr. Jayant to come and light the lamp? Sorry, on behalf of the staff, can I invite Rajinder to come and light the lamp? Is here, please. Here for Rajinder. Yeah. Is he here?
I haven't seen. I called her, but she's not.
Great.
Okay, wonderful. So, Annapurna, please, on behalf of the Scholars Assembly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. On behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Institute, I'd like to thank the scholar. Thank you. Friends, thank you all very much. So I invite Mr. Prasad to get us started with some comments on Pradeep.
Thank you, Professor Sumati Ramaswamy, Director General Purnima Mehta, Dr. Gaur. Thank you for coming and being here with us, Ambassador Khaya Bhattacharya, and members of the AIIS, if I permitted to call you that, fraternity, including those who might be joining us on Zoom from the United States. We are here to commemorate Dr. Pradeep Mehendiratta, who was an inveterate institutional builder and a problem solver and a leader. He was as self-made as you can get. He came from Multan, from Pakistan, at the time of partition with his mother. And he began working, they settled down in Hisar, and he began working as a coolie in the Hisar railway station. And after that, he obtained his graduate and postgraduate degrees. And then he joined AIIS in 1964 and was very active in the institution for over 4 decades. And after joining the institution, he decided to do his doctorate from Kurukshetra University. And he obtained his doctorate and soon became the Director General of AIIS. And he served for 13 years from 1993 to 2005. He continued his association with this institution until we lost him early this year. Pradeep ji had what I can call an excellent EQ. He was warm towards all those who came into contact with. I am taking the liberty to recount a personal anecdote. When I rejoined the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis in early 2018, Dr. Mehendiratta came to see me. And as he entered the room, I told him that I asked him what his preference was, to have tea or coffee. And I said I wouldn't be talking very much because I had just had a very bad stroke and I was recovering from it and I wasn't able to talk very much then. So Dr. Mehendiratta, being the man that he was, he said he had come, there was no need to talk. He had come just to see me for himself, whether I was recovering okay, and he was satisfied. And we stood and we sat for a few minutes and then he left without talking. So that was the man. He had a mission to advance India-US academic exchanges. And once I understood that, I did my utmost to help as much as I could. He encouraged and facilitated American scholars and students to come to India and looked after them and looked after the faculty which taught them. And the whole objective was to promote better India-US understanding. And I'm happy to learn that 92 US universities and colleges are now part of the AIIS fraternity. Besides promoting India-US academic exchanges, AIIS has done a lot to preserve Indian and I would say even South Asian culture. The two centers, that of ethnomusicology and art and architecture, are quite unique. I remember visiting the institute where I met Dr. Gaur for the first time in 2007. It was perhaps November. And I mentioned I was going to Kabul, and then Pradeep ji showed me some marvelous photographs of the two gigantic Bamiyan Buddhas that were destroyed by the Taliban in April 2001. So I said that I'm going to Kabul and I think I should carry these photographs with me. And then before my departure, which was early January, he sent those photographs blown up to my house and I carried them to Kabul. And when I talked to the Afghan authorities after reaching there, I discovered that they had no such documentation and they were absolutely delighted to get those photographs. So it's not just in India and between India and the United States that the AIIS did its work. Pradeep ji was inseparable from AIIS, and that is why nothing can be more appropriate than our having together unveiled his bust within the precincts of this institution. I'm very happy that we did so collectively, and I thank you for your presence. Thank you.
Prasad, I have been given this beautiful privilege of expressing our gratitude to you for your wonderful remarks.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sridhar, and thank you, Mr. Prasad, again. It's now my pleasure to invite Dr. S.P. Gaur, to the podium. Dr. S.P. Gaur is a former member of the Indian Administrative Service, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Education, and of course, a huge well-wisher of the Institute. Dr. Gaur has held several prestigious positions within the Government of India. He became Secretary in the Union Public Service Commission, UPSC. He's also served as Secretary, Department of Excise, UP, and Commissioner of the Agra Division. He was Chairman of Inland Waterways Authority as well. During his tenure as Joint Secretary, Ministry of Human Resources Development in the Department of Higher Education, he's helped the Institute in innumerable ways. He wrote to most universities across India asking them to affiliate all our scholars with them. And this is a hugely important task for us, as you know, and a huge responsibility for the Institute. So I'm so grateful Dr. Gaur played a very instrumental role that enables us to do the research that we all are keen to do in India. So Dr. Gaur.
Thank you, Sumati, for the kind words. And it's a pleasure to meet Mr. Jayant, Prasad, and many colleagues from American Institute present here. I don't know, some of them perhaps have superannuated, but I find them as young as I used to see them in 2001 and later in 2007. Professor Pradeep Mehendiratta is inseparable from American Institute of Indian Studies. He made AIIS what American Institute is today. Of course, on that much has been said and I won't be repeating, because all of you are familiar, all of you are some way or other beneficiary of his love, consideration, support, and many other things that he did for almost everyone who came in his contact. I am also one of them. I joined IIS as a graduate, and my wish was to complete my PhD before I retired. So sometimes during those years when I was about to retire, I spoke to him that I wish to do this. So he became active instantly. He spoke to several people, including University of Pune. He got me a good guide in economics, and because of him, I would give the full credit to my PhD in economics to him, which I completed in 2011, about a year after my retirement in 2010. I give full credit to him. Of course, there are many things I give credit to him, and I lost a good friend. I lost a friend in his departure, and I can be, I think, one of those proud people who are in touch with him till his last days. When he came to see me in Ministry of Education, Ministry of HRD, he was so humble but confident and very knowledgeable. And all through, I found him a very positive, having a great attachment with the AIIS, and totally devoted to the institute. I could have done anything for him within my powers and within my functions in the government of India. And I and Mr. Jayant Prasad together did a few things. Besides the, of course, a part of AIS, I think one of his greatest contribution is to mentor Purnima, to mentor her as a future Director General of AIS. And I sincerely believe, as they say, पूर्णिमा में उनकी थोड़ी सी आत्मा समा गई है. Part of his soul has gone, is inside her. She's equally humble, very knowledgeable, fully devoted to the institute. So far today's occasion is concerned, this is the best tribute we could give him by establishing his bust in the institute. He is together with his institute even after he has gone away from this world. Perhaps a little bigger tribute would be to make American Institute progress on the way that he showed to this institute and turn it into an institute of his dreams. Thank you very much.
May I invite Professor S.N. Sridhar to the podium. Professor Sridhar is a Distinguished Service Professor at State University of New York, and Professor of Linguistics and Indian Studies and Director of the Mattu Center for India Studies. Professor Sridhar.
Thank you very much, Professor Ramaswamy. I made a few notes so that I would not go over the allotted time.
Professorial problem, right?
The only professorial problem is that we are used to dealing with units of time of 40 minutes or more, or 50. Professor Ramaswamy, Mr. Prasad, Mr. Gaur, distinguished scholars, members of the family, members of the staff, and many friends. It's really a great honor for me to be asked to speak on this occasion because we have known the Mehendiratta family since about 1976, which makes it almost a half century. And Pradeep, as everybody called him, And Pradeep Ji, as we all called him, he gave more than 6 decades of his life, day and night, literally day and night, because of the time difference, to the Institute. And it's appropriate that we remember him with this wonderful tribute of installing a bust in his beloved Institute. We came to know the Kachrus, Meena and I came to know Pradeep Ji through the Kachrus, Braj and Yamuna Kachru, who were very dear friends of Pradeep Ji. And our lives have crisscrossed at several crucial points, actually. I first came to as a fellow here many decades ago and many other times. And I was here when Pradeep Ji was one of the passengers on that ill-fated Pan Am flight, which was hijacked. And the family did not know what was happening to him. And the only way we got any news about his well-being was via Chicago. And I remember hundreds of calls from here to Chicago and back and so on and so forth. And Pradeep Ji also suffered a heart attack in Washington, D.C. And after that, he came and recuperated for a couple of weeks in our house. And the entire family came. And I mentioned that because he was such a dear family man. He was so fond of his children and wife and everybody else that he came across. And it was really touching to see how close they were and how supportive they were during his time of difficulty. And I think that helped in his speedier recovery. And we also had the pleasure to attend Deepak's wedding. And I have a story about how Pradeep Ji became Dr. Mehendiratta. He used to tell us that, so many scholars come here and they always refer to me as Dr. Mehendiratta and Dr. Mehendiratta. And I always feel guilty that I'm not a doctor. So maybe I should do something and become a doctor. So I would like to do a thesis and earn a PhD, which he did. And personally, once during my visit here, I came down with malaria. I did not know that it was malaria. And he took me to their house and nursed me to health. And I remember spending several days in their house. And he was so kind and concerned. And I was only one of the many hundreds of people whom he has helped that way. And in fact, all that we need to do is to look at the hundreds of books that have been published by the fellows of the American Institute of Indian Studies. Almost every one of them acknowledge the special help that Pradeep Mehendiratta gave, which made their research possible. And as Prasad ji has said, he started from very humble beginnings. And it was with tremendous amount of hard work and determination and many other qualities that made it possible for him to reach the heights that he did. And these qualities are, I think, very important for us to remember. He engendered trust in other people. So when you talked to him, you trusted him, because the first thing that you noticed about him was that whatever he did not do it out of selfish. There was no self-interest in that. Everything that he did was for the Institute, and whether you agreed with him or not, you could see that he was dedicated to the Institute, and people respected his integrity. And were glad to help him achieve the kinds of things that he wanted to bring about. I would like to just add a couple of remarks about how he was not only a great human being, but also a great institution builder, as you said. The American Institute of Indian Studies is a great institution, partly and mostly because of Pradeep Mehendiratta. And through, as you know, the relationship between India and America politically has gone through ups and downs. And it has not always been smooth. And even now, in spite of the United States saying that India is a great strategic partner and so on, we haven't had an ambassador for 2 years. There was a nice article in the New York Times about how the case of the missing American ambassador. And in the 60s and 70s, it was even more difficult. And now, of course, it's all, people are celebrating how close we are and so on and so forth. But at that time, there was some suspicion, actually. And also, there were difficulties in terms of negotiations and so on. And Pradeep ji was able to manage those things, as Professor Ramaswamy has said in her remark, to skillfully negotiate those difficult times also, and to bring about trust between the United States and India, and to make India studies credible. And one of the most important things he did was to have the strategic vision that in order for the Institute to succeed in this country, it is very important that people realize the importance of India studies and the importance of the kind of work that the Institute does. And he went about convincing people of this in many ways. One of them, Mr. Prasad has already said, is to create these centers and support those centers. The Center for Art and Archaeology, the Center for Ethnomusicology, and of course the library here, and supporting the scholars that came here. And all of those things were very important in creating this credibility. And he also had the strategic vision to see that Indians themselves should identify themselves with the American Institute of Indian Studies, not just Americans. And so he went about on a fundraising campaign to involve Indian philanthropists as well as many state governments, for example, and others, to support the center and the institute so that it would be that they would have some ownership in this. And finally, he also went about seeing that the center, the institute became self-sufficient financially. That was very important. So, for example, it was not easy to convince the Board of Trustees that there should be this a building like this, and that we should get into real estate, investing in the real estate and so on. But he saw that it was important to do this, and also the Defense Colony Institute and the other things that brought about a steady income for the institute and so on. So all of these things were important, and he had the long vision to see what was needed to make the American Institute of Indian Studies both a credible and respected institution. And he gave his entire energy to making that possible. And so it is therefore appropriate that We remember him, and we also remember him as a wonderful human being who was beloved among the staff. He did so much for the staff and to make sure that each of their lives was bettered. And he did all this with a sense of humor, with calmness, with a steadiness. And I remember him teaching me one of those Haryanvi proverbs. Ganne se ganeri meethi, gud se meetha rala, bhai se behna pyari, par sabse pyara sala. And so I shall end by, because this is an American Institute of Indian Studies, two things. One, an Indian remark by Kalidasa, which says that look at trees which bear fruit, they bend down with the weight of their fruit and flowers. And look at clouds that are rain-bearing, they are low-hanging. Similarly, a great man is modest and bends down, and he was one such. And the other thing, quotation would be from an American, a Longfellow, who says, lives of great men all remind us that we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Pradeep ji has left footprints which are difficult to fill, but they are emblazoned in our minds because the ideals that he followed were great and the way he went about doing them is great. And the best tribute that we can pay to him is to make his dreams come true. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sridhar. May I invite Dr. K.R. Bhattacharya to the podium? Dr. Bhattacharya is currently serving as consultant to the Haryana Institute of Public Administration. She's a member of the Indian Foreign Service and joined the service in 1985. She has served in Brussels, Dhaka, Paris, Kathmandu, and Geneva. Professor Dr. Bhattacharya.
Professor Ramaswamy, Ambassador Prasad, Shri Gaur, Director General Purnima, dear friend Deepak. My reminiscences will be a little different because Professor Mehendiratta was a family friend. So he was a very close friend of my father, and our association was from the 1960s. And I was a very small girl. I don't think Purnima was born at that time, or Deepak was probably just a toddler. But I do have memories when we returned from Germany that our houses were close by, and Deepak, your father, and they'd drop in my parents' place, and my mother was that time completing her doctorate in philosophy. So they'd have animated conversations, and my father was that time in Ministry of Education. It was not called Human Resource Development. And he had, what I remember is later when we moved to multi-storied flats after returning from Libya, is that whenever he came to our house, the house would spring to life, as I told Purnima. And our tutors would be somewhere else. We would be studying for our higher secondary, or 10+2 was the last batch of higher secondary. And as soon as Dr. Mehendiratta would come, we'd drop everything and come, because he'd tell my mother, get me a cup of tea and I have to discuss this or that and the other. And the house would be vibrant. And he had a way of describing even the most mundane or simple thing with a lot of joy and verb. And you could see the energy radiating from his personality. We did a lot of things together, We went to India International Center together. I remember, of course, we played, and there was an occasion which I shared with Purnima when Ananda Shankar Ray's son, Dr. Punnaslok Ray, who was an Indologist, he was there. And he had a son called Chandrahash, and we would be playing. I mean, he took a lot of the bed sheets and, with like a cloak, and we'd sort of follow him. But I remember these personalities and the names that would come to our house. I was seeing Professor Dimmock's name, and, we had these interactions at that time. I wish my parents were alive, because they'd be able to sort of, put context in some of the meetings and associations we had, but I was very young at that time. And subsequently, I met Professor Mehendiratta when I had joined the service after 1985, and I had returned from Paris, and I was an Indian Council for Cultural Relations, and I was looking after the relations of the scholarship programs. So you had the International Students Division, and he came and he asked me what I was doing, and I explained to him the scholarship program for the government of India and how our scholars mostly came from developing countries and the subjects they studied. And he said, "Do you have any information material about this?" And I shared with the Studying in India handbooks and the scholars. And at that time, Meera Shankar was the Director General, subsequently succeeded by Himachal Soom, Ambassador Himachal Soom. So I said, would you like to see there's a big event done at ICCR close to the birthday of Maulana Azad called the International Students' Day, where we encourage the foreign scholars, because many of them do not have the time or the resources to go back to India, and they're still studying there, where they do a cultural program of their countries. And one of the colleagues of Pandit Anand Shankar, called Pandit Narendra Sharma, would choreograph their presentations. So we had presentations of dance from Afghanistan, Mauritius, various countries, which of course the president of, at that time, I think, Pranab Mukherjee or Karan Singh were attending, and your father attended one of those programs. And he said there should be scope for collaboration between AIIS and in this cultural endeavor. When I, after superannuating, I joined HIPAA, I came to meet Purnima, and she told me that my father had been looking for you. So I think it's his soul that brought me to AIIS, probably, and we have reconnected. And it's wonderful to share some of these anecdotes with you today. And I thank you, Purnima, for providing me this platform and opportunity to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bhattacharya. May I invite Mr. Sikri, B.R. Sikri, to the podium. Mr. Sikri is another well-wisher of the Institute, an industrialist and a philanthropist.
Under the banner of this American Institute of Indian Studies, when we talk about the Indian studies, so Hindi is also one of the study which I would preferably speak in Hindi. If somebody has got any question, I can give a reply later. आज की इस सभा को देखने के बाद ऐसे लग रहा था कि जैसे आप इस महान आत्मा के प्रति कुछ श्रद्धांजलि सभा कर रहे हैं, which is not, जो सच नहीं है. किसी ने गालिब से पूछा कैसे हैं, गालिब ने कहा जिंदगी में गम है, गम में दर्द है, दर्द में मज़ा है और मैं मज़े में हूँ. ये वो शख्सियत थे जो गम में और दर्द में भी मज़े में रहते थे. कहते हर मर्ज़ का इलाज नहीं दवा खाने में, कुछ मर्ज़ ठीक हो जाते हैं मुस्कुराने में. तो मेरी आप सभी से प्रार्थना है कि इतने गंभीर माहौल में मत बैठिएगा, क्योंकि मैं डॉक्टर साहब के बारे में कुछ नहीं बोलने वाला हूँ. हालांकि मैंने काफ़ी कुछ पढ़ लिया है, यहाँ इतने बुद्धिजीवी बैठे हैं. आई वॉज लिटिल बिट हेजिटेंट टू स्पीक कि स्कॉलर बैठे हैं, डिप्लोमेट्स बैठे हैं, एकेडमिशियंस बैठे हैं और बुद्धिजीवी बैठे हैं. एक आई स्टार्टेड माई कैरियर एज ए बाबू, देन आई बाई लक बिकेम इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट, वो एक बात की बात है। तो भगवान कृष्ण ने 18 अध्याय में, पहले अध्याय में अर्जुन का रोना धोना है, विषाद। दूसरे अध्याय के 9 श्लोक तक भी अर्जुन का रोना धोना है। 10वें श्लोक में भगवान कृष्ण क्या कहते हैं? तम उवाच ऋषिकेश प्रसन्न भारता। हे अर्जुन, युद्ध के मैदान में मेरी बात को प्रसन्नचित होकर के सुन। युद्ध होने वाला है, कई बहनें विडो हो जाएंगी, विधवा हो जाएंगी, कई बच्चे अनाथ हो जाएंगे, लेकिन फिर भी कह रहे हैं कि प्रसन्नचित होकर के, क्योंकि जो होना है वो होना है। मैं सब कुछ जानता हूं, क्या करूंगा और क्या होगा, मगर होगा वही जिसमें तुम्हारा ही भला होगा। मैं यदि चाहूं नहीं तो ज्ञान मिल सकता नहीं, मेरी इच्छा के बिना पत्ता भी हिल सकता नहीं। तो इसलिए जो होना है वो होना है। आप थोड़ा सा गंभीर होकर मत बैठिए, मैं 5 मिनट आपकी जरूर लूंगा। 10 प्रकार के महान लोग होते हैं, ऋषि, मुनि, योगी, तपस्वी, महात्मा, महापुरुष, ज्ञानी, फकीर। ये 10 कैटेगरी हैं। ये इन 10 महान तत्वों को जब कभी आप मिश्रित कर देते हैं तो उसमें से एक महान तत्व निकलता है। कभी कभी उस महान तत्व में से भी कोई तत्व निकलता है, वो तत्व था डॉक्टर प्रदीप मेहंदीरत्ता। तो इसलिए हमें ऐसे व्यक्ति के प्रति थोड़ा अलग तरीके से बैठना है, क्योंकि वो ज्ञानी भी थे। मुनि क्या करता है? मनन करता है। मनन मीन्स एनालिसिस, चिंतन करता है। चिंतन मीन्स एनालिटिकल एनालिसिस। ऋषि क्या करता है? अनुसंधान करता है, इनोवेशन करता है। तो उनके अंदर सारे गुण थे। लेकिन प्रायः क्या होता है कि जब कोई महान व्यक्ति चला जाता है तो आपके मन में क्या ख्याल आता है कि उनकी बातों को याद करो। दैट इज व्हाट वी आर डूइंग टुडे। आपने अपने अपने अनुभव के हिसाब से, लेकिन मैं थोड़ा अलग पद्धति पे चलता हूं। मैं चाहता हूं कि उस महान आत्मा को किस बात के, किस काम के करने से प्रसन्नता होगी, मैं वो काम करना चाहिए। आपने उनकी तारीफ करी, ये प्राय होता है, करनी भी चाहिए। आफ्टर दीपक जी के पिताजी थे, मैंने भी उनके दर्शन किए हुए हैं। लेकिन मैं बैठे हुए अभी चिंतन कर रहा था, कहते हमारे जीवन का आधार क्या है? हमारे जीवन का आधार है प्राण ऊर्जा, मीन्स वट एवर वी आर ब्रीदिंग, ऑक्सीजन। और इस प्राण ऊर्जा का आधार क्या है? प्राण ऊर्जा का आधार है पेड़ और पौधे। और पेड़ पौधों का आधार क्या है? पर्यावरण। पर्यावरण का आधार क्या है? प्रकृति। प्रकृति का आधार क्या है? ईश्वर। ईश्वर का आधार क्या है? परब्रह्म। यदि हमने इन सब में संतुलन रखना है तो हमें प्रकृति का और पर्यावरण का ध्यान रखना होगा। वो ये नहीं चाहते कि मेरे गुण गाओ। Dr. Mehendiratta doesn't want, his soul doesn't want that you should praise me. He wants you to do something where his coming generation, next to next generation should also be happy. तो उसके लिए मैंने पर्यावरण के लिए, मैंने जैसे आपको बोला, राम ने क्या किया? त्रेता युग की बात कर रहा हूं मैं, कोई कलयुग की बात नहीं कर रहा हूं, द्वापर की युग नहीं। हमारे यहाँ शादी के बाद हनीमून मनाने के लिए हम कहाँ जाते हैं? स्विट्जरलैंड। और पीपल हु कैनॉट अफोर्ड दे गो टू श्रीनगर और नैनीताल, डिपेंडिंग ऑन योर पॉकेट। वो कहाँ गए? वनवास में गए। रावण को मारने के लिए नहीं गए, वो आपके पर्यावरण को संतुलित करने के लिए गए। पृथ्वी ने जाकर के विष्णु से प्रार्थना करी कि प्रभु, राक्षसों ने, ये राक्षस कौन है जो आज भी पेड़ काट रहे? वो राक्षस ही हैं। कहते तन से तो कोई भी प्राणी सुर असुर न माना जाता है, आचरण से देवता और निश्चर पहचाना जाता है। यदि आप अच्छा काम करते हैं तो आप देवता हैं, और अगर गलत काम करते हैं तो आप राक्षस हैं। तो जाकर के विष्णु से प्रार्थना की कि राक्षसों ने हमारी पृथ्वी को बहुत असंतुलित कर रखा है। तो विष्णु ने क्या बोला? बड़ा पोएटिक वे में सुनाने जा रहा हूं आपको। उन्होंने बोला, पृथ्वी ए मेरी प्यारी पृथ्वी, मैं तेरा ताप मिटाता हूं। व्हाट इज ताप? ग्लोबल वार्मिंग, जिसको आज की भाषा में आप तो डिप्लोमेट हैं, कि पृथ्वी ए मेरी प्यारी पृथ्वी, मैं तेरा ताप मिटाता हूं। दशरथ के यहां राम बनकर अतिशीघ्र अवध में आता हूं। भक्तों अब तुम निश्चिंत रहो, अब तुम्हें न कोई भय होगा। ये धरणी होगी धराधाम, धरणी धर का अभिनय होगा। सुन सकते नहीं कान मेरे, अत्याधिक पुकार अधीनों की। ये पृथ्वी होगी वीरों की, पृथ्वी न होगी हीनों की। उन्होंने जन्म लिया किसके लिए? पर्यावरण को संतुलित करने के लिए। और जवानी में, विवाह के बाद हनीमून 14 वर्ष के लिए अपना यौवन दे दिया हमारी आने वाली संतान के लिए। वो चाहते तो एक बहुत बड़े राजा थे, जब युद्ध हुआ तो उनके लिए बड़ा आसान था, कहीं किसी भी राज्य के राजा को बुला करके ना, उन्होंने किसको लिया साथ? निषाद राज, जिसको आज की डेट में हम कोई शेड्यूल कहता है, कोई बैकवर्ड क्लास कहता है, केवट, बानर जाति, रीछ जाति, उनको साथ लिया। भगवान कृष्ण ने क्या किया द्वापर में? उन्होंने अपना बाल्यकाल में, प्राय आप और हम सब स्कूल जाते हैं, वो युवा अवस्था तक स्कूल नहीं गए थे, मात्र वनों की रक्षा की। आपने नाम सुना वृंदावन, लास्ट में क्या है? वन, मधुबन, निधि बन, गोवर्धन, गोवर्धन मतलब गौओं के वर्धन के लिए भी, क्योंकि दैट इज ऑल्सो ए पार्ट ऑफ अवर एनवायरमेंट। एक बहुत सुंदर मंत्र आता है जब आप यज्ञ करते हैं, ओम अयंत इद्म आत्मा जात वेद से ने धस्व वर्धस्व तेस वर्धया चासमान प्रजया, प्रजा की बढ़ोतरी के लिए, प्रजया पशु भी ब्रह्म वर्चसे, पशुओं की बढ़ोतरी के लिए उन्होंने प्रार्थना की यज्ञ के अंदर। आज भी हम यज्ञ करते हैं, अगर आप कोई आर्य समाज विधि से करते हैं तो उसमें बहुत सुंदर 5 बारी, क्योंकि हमारी 5 ज्ञान इंद्रियां हैं, 5 कर्म इंद्रियां हैं, 5 प्राण हैं, 5 उपप्राण हैं, तो इस वजह से तो हमारे जो, जिनको हम ईश्वर कहते हैं भगवान कृष्ण, या जिनको हम अपने ईश्वर कहते हैं भगवान राम, जिनको आराध्य मानते हैं हम, तो उन्होंने भी पर्यावरण के लिए सारा काम किया। तो मेरी दीपक मेहंदीरत्ता जी के परिवार से प्रार्थना है कि यदि वास्तव में आप अपने आने वाली पीढ़ी और जो चले गए शरीर से, येनम वेति हंतारम यशेनम मन्यते हतम, शरीर से गए हैं, आत्मा से नहीं गए। आपने अभी कोई बस्ट कह रहा है, कोई मूर्ति कह रहा है, कोई कह रहा है जी उनकी, बेसिकली हमारे जो आध्यात्मिक भाषा में इसको बोलना चाहिए विग्रह। विग्रह मीन जिसके अंदर प्राण है, क्योंकि आप उनको शाल पहना रहे हैं, इसका मतलब आपके मन में कुछ भाव है कि वो हैं हमारे बीच में। तो उनकी याद में आपको यदि संभव हो सके, चाहे एक पौधा लगाओ। आप जितने भी परिवार के सदस्य हैं, आपकी बहन है, आपकी बिटिया है, एक, जब भी 22 जनवरी का मेरे ख्याल उनकी डेथ एनिवर्सरी है, एक नियम बना लो। मैंने पिछले कुछ 6 महीने में 46,000 पौधे लगवाए अपनी किसी सामाजिक संस्था के माध्यम से, विद द कंडीशन कि वी विल हैव ए वीडियो रिकॉर्डिंग। Not only that, we have the data with us. You can go and see कि yes, the school children are really taking care of that plant. खाली लगाना होता है औपचारिकता, दिखावा, लेकिन उसको 2 महीने या 3 महीने के लिए प्रकृति सिर्फ आपसे सहायता मांगती है, उसके बाद प्रभु उनका खुद ही ध्यान रखते हैं। तो कहते हैं बदल के रंग को तस्वीर बदल देते हैं, कमान से निकला हुआ तीर बदल देते हैं, तुझसे तेरे आंसू न बदले ए बंदा परवर, बदलने वाले तो तकदीर बदल देते हैं। तो आप चाहो तो आने वाले संतान की तकदीर इस माध्यम से, क्योंकि मैं आई एम नाइदर ए स्कॉलर नॉर ए पॉलिटिशियन, सेमी पॉलिटिशियन जरूर हूँ, सोशल वर्कर हूँ, तो इसलिए मेरी आपसे प्रार्थना है कि वास्तविक जो उनके प्रति श्रद्धा होगी आपकी, या आपके मन के जो भाव है, बिकॉज आई नो द फैमिली वेरी वेल, तो इसलिए मेरे आपसे सुझाव है, पर्टिकुलरली ध्रुव और उसकी सिस्टर से, कि आप कुछ ऐसा करो कि उनके दादाजी खिलखिलाए, मुस्कुराए। धन्यवाद।
Dhanyavad, Sikri Saab. Mr. Ved Jain, who's our wonderful auditor for many, many, many years. Please may I invite you to say a few words. And we are running short of time, so we've got a few more comments to make because I know people want to, yeah. Please.
President AIS, Professor Samaya, Mr. Prasad, Mr. Gord, honored academicians, scholars, and of course all dear staff of the American Institute with whom I have been associated. I was just wondering when I was coming to this place, my association with Dr. Mehendiratta probably goes more than 45 years if I can recollect correctly on that issues. I was just trying to find out at what time I have met it and in what context we have met it. Because as I see in the last more than 4 decades, as was being said earlier, the institute has gone through many turbulence on this. I being not only an auditor, but also being associated with Dr. Mehendiratta for various critical issues, decision making, processes, etc. So I could see from very close quarter what is happening, how it is happening. Though I was a consultant, But I later found that whether I am a consultant or Dr. Mehendiratta is a consultant for me. Every time the meeting ended, I used to get something, learn from something from Dr. Mehendiratta. So polite, so humble, and so visionary, I will say. At many times, so much crucial decision has been taken to sustain and perpetuate what institution we are today. There have been instances, there have been occasions when we find that institution is running into difficulty, how we will be able to survive, how we will be able to continue. When this plot was bought and building was taken, then defense colony was taken. The planning which went through on that process was his vision, I believe it. Another quality which I could find it from him was that the sense of belonging and to take everybody along with it. He was dedicated to the American institutes. This institution came, I think, in existence in 1961, and we celebrated 60 years last year only. And he joined this institution in 64. So I would say AIS is as good as Dr. Pradeep Mehendiratta for that he is. And the person, the way he has a vision and dedications, and of course now Purnima is taking care of that with the same dedication and same visions and not taking much time. I believe that today is the right time when we have unveiled the bust of Dr. Mehendiratta to perpetuate his memory, and this institution will always remember the way he has built this institution. Thank you, Fred.
So, on this occasion, we have received so many tributes and memorials for Dr. Mehendiratta and Pradeep. And because we are running short of time, I'm just going to read a few of them, and we are going to save the rest and make them available through some kind of means that, will be will perpetuate Dr. Pradeep's memory. I want to begin with a set of comments from Ralph Nicholas, former president of the Institute, and I'm going to quote him. "I'm sorry that I am not present today to celebrate Pradeep. The AIIS owes its present good health and many generations of research accomplishments to his unfailing commitment to our work. I first met Pradeep about 45 years ago when I was a vice president of the Institute. Pradeep had stepped in to keep the AIIS operating during a period when American research in India was viewed with suspicion. The Institute might not exist today if he had not deployed his natural diplomacy and persistence so effectively through that dark period. The 1980s might have been an even darker period for Pradeep when he experienced a heart attack and was victim of a terrorist airplane hijacking in Pakistan. But he would not be stopped. In 1994, he laid the foundation stone of a new AIIS headquarters in what was then called Gurugram. Perhaps due to his early life as a refugee, Pradeep did not miss an opportunity to invest AIIS assets with a view to the future. The valuable building at D31 Defense Colony is further testimony to his devotion to the long-term security of the Institute. There are scholars across the United States and around the world who do not know how much they owe to Pradeep. I hope this small memorial will remind us all of our debt." And now I'll read comments from Philip Lutgendorf, also former president of the Institute and current chair of the board. "I echo Ralph G's regret at not being present with you all to honor Pradeep Mehendiratta, and also his summary of just a few of Pradeep's accomplishments from which thousands of scholars of South Asia have benefited, I among them. But I want to add a personal note. I first met Pradeep during the 1978-79 academic year, my first year in the PhD program of the Department of South Asian Languages and Civilizations at the University of Chicago. The AIIS office was in Foster Hall, where the department was also housed, and Pradeep must have come for a meeting. I knew nothing of AIIS then, but was struggling to master Hindi in an intermediate level class that was more frustrating than necessary. Pradeep told me about the intensive AIIS Advanced Hindi program in India and encouraged me to apply for the following year. I received a fellowship and was able to go to Delhi with my wife and 2-year-old daughter. Once we were there, Pradeep became our Bade Bhai Sahab and an unfailing, kind and helpful host as we adjusted to Indian life. His personal warmth, no less than his extraordinary networking skills and willingness and ability to help facilitate tasks big and small, contributed greatly to the very positive living and research experiences that inspired me and so many other scholars to devote our careers to studying and teaching about India's rich and complex civilization. Thank you, Pradeep Bhai. I'm also going to read comments now from Kathy Asher. As many of you know, we are gathered together also to celebrate Rick Asher, former president of the AIS, and of course, Kathy. It is with mixed feelings that I send this message for these two momentous events. One, the unveiling of the bust honoring Pradeep Mehendiratta, and the conference reflecting Rick's contributions to the study of Indian art history. I am thrilled that these two events are happening concurrently, but saddened that I'm unable to attend. I would have liked to acknowledge in person Pradeep's remarkable, almost supernatural achievements in bringing the Institute to the level of success it knows today. And of course, I would have liked nothing more than to celebrate Rick and his legacy. It is fitting that these two events are side by side as Pradeep and Rick worked closely together for many years, years that transcended Rick's presidency of the Institute. They were more than working partners, but also close friends. It was a friendship that lasted until Rick's death. I can say without hesitation how honored and touched each would be to learn of these events. I also want to thank each conference participant, several of whom are here, personally for your contributions that I'm sure will reflect Rick's scholarly insights and provide us with significant ways to explore future issues. Many of you have traveled far at a busy time of the year to attend these events, and I thank you ever so much. I thank all of you, but would like especially to acknowledge Sumathi and Rebecca Brown and Purnima Mehta for their pivotal roles in the production of these two events. Have a wonderful 2 days exploring new ways to think about India, its art and history. I am with you in heart and spirit. And finally, I wanted to, as I bring the event to a formal close, I want to begin by thanking the staff of the Institute, many of whom are here in the room with you. I would hope you will take some time to talk to them. They are the ones who, really called upon me, asked me if we could do something to celebrate and commemorate Pradeep's memory. I asked them what they would like to do, and they talked about the bust. I would like to acknowledge Vandana Sinha, who is over there, who made the arrangements for creating the bust. And really, the Institute would not be what it is without the staff. And we scholars say it all the time, but it is worth saying again and again. So I wanted to begin by saying that. I also want to say a few words myself in honor of Pradeep. Over the decades, I interacted with him in many capacities. First as a senior fellow when I arrived in India in the winter of 2001. Then when I worked for the Ford Foundation as a program officer, and the Institute was, of course, a very important grantee of the foundation. I still recall the really beautiful and wonderful farewell dinner he hosted on the lawns of the IIC in the summer of 2005 when I returned to the US. Then, of course, I interacted with him many years when I was trustee of the AIS, and then since 2018 as president. As many others have already recalled, the Institute in India, whether it's here in Gurugram or in Defense Colony or in our many other sites across India, many important language programs, bear the imprint of his vision and leadership over so many years and his effective stewardship. As we gather here to honor his memory and recall our varied ties with him, I should also mention with gratitude that just a couple weeks ago, his son Deepak, who is also here with us this evening, made a generous contribution to our Digital India Learning Program, which will enable us to fund every summer for the next 3 years a graduate student from the US to travel to Gurugram and work with the collections housed in our 2 research centers, which Pradeep helped build. It gives me great pleasure to thank Deepak formally and publicly on behalf of the Institute, our community of scholars, for his generosity, for helping advance a cause that is dear to many of us here, and I believe to his late father, in whose name and honor he has conducted this philanthropic act. And may I now invite Rajinder, I think, to present a shawl to Deepak.
Because it is a AS fraternity. I call AS family. You have to know.
So with that, the formal part of this event concludes, but not before we all adjourn to the adjacent room for some refreshments. Please stay, talk. Pradeep would have loved that conviviality, I think, so please join us for some tea and refreshments. Thank you.
From Purnima.
She didn't want to speak and she didn't really want to, but Purnima, do you want to say a few words? Please. She was so hesitant as you, but I'm sure you'll be very crisp and brief.
Thank you. I'll do my best. What can I say? As I'm a proud daughter today, and Dad, I'm sure you're with us today in some form or the other, basking in glory. What can I say today that has not already been said? But I'd like to share some of our conversations that were so typical of each of our visits to our parents' home. Each time Deepak, my brother, visited home with our families, we would find our father engrossed, sitting on his favorite couch and making notes. I would ask him what he was doing, and he would look up, smiling and welcoming as always. But so preoccupied, he would say, "You know, the AIIS can get so much more funding. In these 60 years, the Institute has awarded 4,000 fellowships, resulting in publications that are so most valuable." And as always, Deepak would get up and say, "Dad, not AIIS again. This is our time. Please, there is more important stuff to talk. And we are here to talk about us and you. That is all." He would keep quiet, but express his disappointment in a different manner altogether. He would signal his grandchildren to come and sit with him. "Mere bachcho, my children, do you know how hard I have worked in life?" He would point out to all his degrees that he got laminated and his publication, his book on university administration in India and the US. He would tell all his grandchildren how he was in the first batch of the Faculty of Management Studies, Delhi University, the prestigious FMS Delhi, and passed with a distinction. He would go on to say, "You know, I had no money in the early part of my life. I used to borrow a bicycle and every morning ride the bike from Lajpat Nagar to Mehroli, a good 12 kilometers in the harsh November winter to provide tuition to a young child. He would come back, get ready for his full-time job, return in the evening and attend evening classes for his postgraduate study. Takdeer और तदबीर साथ साथ चलते हैं बेटा. Destiny and planning or strategizing must go hand in hand." Now as we look back, simple things that he said have great value that we hope we have imbibed and we hope it can pass on to our children, our grandchildren. I would like to conclude with a morning prayer that my father used to recite in his elementary school that became the guiding light for him and I hope for all of us. "Dard-e dil, paase wafa, jazba-e iman hona. Yahi hai insaniyat, ise kehte hain insaan hona. One who has compassion for others, regard for fidelity, and strong desire for trustworthiness and integrity. This is how you define humanity, and this is what being human means." Thank you. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Dr. Gaur, for making this happen. All day she's been saying, no, I'm not going to say
That's right.
anything. All day. So, miracle. Thank you all very much.